This story begins as many others do, by happenstance. For health reasons, I walk a lot. I'm getting up in years, and cardio is indeed my friend. Luckily, where I live there are numerous trails and parks to get exercise. It's ideal when you want to have scenery and a view, instead of a boring old treadmill. A few years ago, I bought one of those telescopic climbing poles from a well-known outdoors outfitters for the more treacherous areas, but I also carry it for practical reasons. In the wild, you encounter wildlife. Even in my rural neighborhood, some of the neighbors' dogs roam free. Most couldn't care less about me walking by, but when I walk my dog, that's a different matter. Seeing a large wolf-like husky triggers some primal territorial instinct in them to attack both of us. They charge at her like she's the canine antichrist, and I'm caught in the middle of their turf war. It doesn't matter that we are on public property and my dog doesn't even want what's theirs. They're too triggered to be controlled, and their irresponsible owners do not care about the mandatory leash or fence law. I carry the metal pole to defend us when the need arises. On one of my many hiking excursions, I stepped off the trailhead until I was far enough out of sight to answer the call of nature. Between two huge pine trees, I spotted an oddly shaped stick with a glaring ray of sunshine focused right in the middle of it. While it hadn't been manipulated by human hands, it was highly unusual looking. Honestly, I was smitten. It was the Excalibur of random sticks in the forest. Vines had once wrapped around it, which served to deform the palm-sized trunk. It caused a spiraling serpentine pattern running the full length of it, with bulged edges in the spaces where normal growth hadn't been restricted. It was about 5 feet long and just about the right size to serve as a walking stick. Gandalf himself would have chosen it as his staff. The remnants of the root ball at the end were perfectly shaped to grip with my fist. It fit like a glove. I carried the amazing discovery back home to use the next time I went walking. My fancy store-bought hiking pole went in the closet. That night I actually dreamt about the curious woodland find. How boring are my unconscious thoughts that I dream of gnarled sticks. In all fairness, though, this was no ordinary piece of birch I'd happened upon. The ray of light was perfectly affixed to it. I knew in my heart I was meant to discover it, even if the actual reasons for the kismet were not yet evident. As the weekdays passed, my fixation on the bewitched staff dissipated only slightly. When the weekend arrived, so did the desire to use it. My dog needs regular walks, so I try to arrange exercise for the both of us. Anyone with a husky knows they are anxious and raring to go the minute you grab your walking gear. They live for that little pleasure, so the second I gathered up my things, she was at full attention. Interestingly, she hovered around the new walking stick on the porch, despite me never having used it before on our walks. She already understood what its basic purpose was, or maybe she was attuned to its special abilities. No sooner than we'd left the car, the stick seemed to guide me towards a lesser-traveled fork of the trails. I realized the idea was preposterous. It's an inanimate object. I ignored the feeling of being led or directed, while allowing the unspoken whims to determine our meandering path. Sometimes I let Thelma decide which way we go. For possibly the first time ever, she let me lead the walk. The truth is, my new staff was drawing us towards something it wanted us to find. I didn't realize it at the time, but its pull is not unlike the magnetic draw of a water witch. We hadn't walked more than a quarter mile into the deeper forest when my feet unexpectedly veered off the marked trail, as if they had a mind of their own. That's when I realized the bottom part of the staff was actually pulling me towards something. I'd lift it straight off the ground, and then it would lean toward the area it wanted us to go next. It was as if an invisible rope was tied to the bottom and pulling independently of our natural instincts or walking choices. Even more telling than that, my dog automatically walked in the exact same direction the stick drew us upon. They were in unison of this unknown mission. I was just a hapless bystander. Initially, I was in denial about those things. It was such a crazy idea that I was determined to fight against it. I'd try to redirect us, but it would gently pull us back on course. I thought I might have been losing my mind, or possibly dreaming. How could a piece of gnarled wood I'd found dictate the path of our walks? More importantly, how did Thelma know what it had in mind? Once I'd resigned myself to allowing our hike to be coordinated by an enchanted walking stick, things were fine. I just let it lead us. Near the edge of a high cliff, I spotted something shiny, partially buried in the fallen leaves. It was a key ring with a half-dozen keys on it. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. Someone had lost them and might still be looking for them. We walked back to the marked trail, and soon encountered a troubled-looking couple walking toward us, with their eyes transfixed to the ground. I almost chuckled at the serendipity. They were no longer nature hiking. They were looking for something which they'd apparently lost. I was pretty sure I knew what it was. "Have you misplaced something?" I asked coyly. Both of them went to speak at once. She was obviously very exasperated and spoke over him. "Our car keys fell out of his pocket somewhere, and we've been looking for them for at least 2 hours. I'm beyond exhausted walking these trails, trying to find a needle in the haystack. We can't even leave here until we find them." Not wanting to torture them any longer, I shook them audibly in my pocket and smiled. Then I tossed them to the beleaguered gentleman. He'd obviously been roasted for quite some time. Hopefully, he'd be out of the doghouse soon. "I found them off the trail over there by the cliff edge. You must have lost them taking pictures over there." They both laughed at the realization they would have never thought to backtrack so far off the marked trail. I didn't dare explain that my magic stick mysteriously pulled us to the spot, or they might have ran away thinking I was a lunatic. Frankly, I was happy to do a good deed for the day. Even then, I wasn't completely sold on the far-out idea it took us to a remote spot to help out the frustrated couple. That would have required a little bit more than finding a set of lost keys. I wasn't prepared to consider that an inanimate piece of timber possessed paranormal capabilities. That surreal little moment of truth came later. On the next hike, the wandering stick led Thelma and I to a remote, rocky outcropping. It was more insistent this time. My dog pulled aggressively on her leash until she could reach a spot beside the rocks. I figured she knew a squirrel was hiding in there, but the random way she pawed various areas of the rock formation didn't seem to be about catching a rogue rodent. There was actually a method to her madness. I could see she was trying desperately to uncover something. I'd never seen Thelma that focused on anything, and it was fascinating to watch. I gave her more slack to achieve her mission, whatever it was. Meanwhile, my walking stick seemed to be pulling me towards the backside of the rocks. She has systematically dug up a rough grid of dirt until the underlying surface of the boulder. For the first time, beneath it was finally exposed. It took a minute for what I was seeing to register. The sheer size and scale was massive, and that played heavily into why it required extra time for the amazing truth to make sense. The outcropping of dirt-covered rocks, which thousands had hiked past, while totally unaware, was the exposed tip of a gigantic fossil site. I'm no paleontologist, but the artifact was definitely the remains of a prehistoric dinosaur, of the plant-eating variety. The organic skin and fleshy tissues were long gone, and the bones jutted out of the soil were petrified replicas now, but it looked mostly intact. It was an incredible find, but since it was found on a state park, there was no question who owned it. I phoned the forest ranger's voicemail and left a message. I wasn't about to blurt out that my dog and bewitched walking stick uncovered a massive dinosaur fossil buried on the mountainside. That would have been the surest way to be labeled a crank caller. I simply stated that I needed someone to call me back right away. When they finally did, I was understandably vague. I asked the ranger to meet me at the trail so I could show him in person. He didn't want to come without more details, and I couldn't blame him. I forwarded him some pictures I shot with my phone. That got his attention. When he finally did meet me, he brought a friend from the university. I led them both to the outcropping. When they saw it, they couldn't believe their eyes. Seeing it partially exposed by an eager husky was far more impressive than gazing at a handful of smartphone pictures. The ranger's buddy had connections with a major museum and wanted to establish legal rights to excavate the site. That was out of my hands. I showed them the bones. They did the rest. At least I had Thelma's muddy paws and to justify how I'd found it. Later, I was interviewed by the AP Wire News Service and officially credited with the find. That was pretty cool. Maybe I'll get a plaque on the wall when the dinosaur is put on display. The reporter went on and on about how it was a miracle my dog had picked that exact spot to dig, but I just smiled and nodded. The secret of my walking stick remained safe for the time being. If I had any doubts about its supernatural abilities, they were long gone. With my handy mystery-solving device, I was tempted to get more things, but I work during the week. By the time I get home in the evening and eat, it's far too late to go off somewhere on an adventure. The big excursions would have to be limited to the weekend. Still, Thelma needed her exercise, so we just went for a quick little trek in the neighborhood. I hoped it would be a peaceful walk, but the roving pack of neighborhood canine bullies wouldn't allow that to be. Near the middle of our quick circuit around the street, they circled around with the intent to intimidate, or worse. As they closed in on us, I was prepared to defend both of us by any means necessary. It was a basic reflex, but as soon as I raised the walking stick to threaten to bludgeon them, they began to whimper and shake. The feral dogs went from attack mode to terrified immediately. It wasn't from me, and it wasn't from my dog's defensive stance against them. It wasn't even from the threat of being hit by a large piece of wood. They were cowering in fear because of the wandering stick's ominous power. Somehow they knew. It began to vibrate in my hands. The higher I raised it off the ground and pointed it toward them, the more they backed away and squealed. I wasn't sure if it was going to shoot laser beams or bolts of lightning at the snarling beasts, but they quickly recognized they were in grave danger and fled. Hopefully they remembered we weren't ones to be trifled with. It's funny, though. Even after I understood the enchanted staff held undeniable supernatural abilities, I didn't worry about my own safety in wielding it. Perhaps that was due to the events I'd experienced so far had all been very positive encounters. I was harnessing its powers for good. At least, that's what I told myself. I had no reason to think otherwise. Hey everyone, it's Evie. It's been a while since I've been in the space to be creative, and this is some very different content than what I've put up in the past when I first started. Since it's been so long, I wanted to try and revive things by doing something different than just horror stories. See how everybody is liking it. I know I kinda do, like the change. Thanks for being so patient, everyone. With how long of a hiatus this channel's had, there will be more videos in the future, I promise. Please like if you enjoyed the story, share the video. And of course, please do subscribe as well. On to the next one. Bye!